Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our walk in nature this morning, listening to the song of nature as our prelude. My name is Margaret Griffith. I'm the Director of Religious Education at First Parish in Lincoln, and I welcome you to this virtual worship service this summer. While our sanctuary waits patiently for us to return, we gather here online via Zoom. We are physically distant, but joined together in our love and care for each other. During this service, we keep our computers muted, but we hope that folks are reading and singing along at home, connecting ourselves that way spiritually as well. If you have prayers for later on in the service, I invite you to type them into the chat. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat box, and you can call that up and type in a prayer that we'll share later. Also later this morning, as part of my pastoral message, I'll be asking you to type the name of somebody that an innovator, an outside of the box type of thinker or believer or doer who is an idol of yours or somebody that you admire. So I'll give you that for the reflective learners to think about. Impulsive learners, you'll have no problem later on typing that name into the chat. All right. And now we'll have a few announcements this morning. The first from Mary Gaylord on behalf of the Anti-Racism Task Force and Outreach.
Good morning, everybody. This week we wrapped up our pop-up clothing drive for Solutions at Work, which does amazing work in Cambridge and Dorchester for underserved communities. They are working at the moment with a very difficult logistical situation because they are prohibited from bringing people into their center at the Old Cambridge Baptist Church and in Dorchester. So they are making deliveries of needed clothing items, especially for children, to families who've registered with them. And we put out a call. As you know, many of you stepped up, many of you cleaned out your drawers and closets and brought beautiful things, and quite a few people went out and bought new dresses and bathing suits and shorts and underwear and socks. And I'm really overwhelmed with the response. We delivered 1.5 SUVs full of clothing to Solutions at Work, and they are extremely grateful. I want to thank Outreach and Margaret for putting out the word with the families and everyone who participated. It's really very heartwarming to see how ready members of First Parish are to step up when we know of a real need, and this is a real need. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. And Sarah Bishop has an announcement as well.
Good morning. Once again, the Lincoln Food Pantry needs our help. The Greater Boston Food Bank is unable to supply everything needed for the food pantry clients to pick up next week. There are 250 seniors, adults, and children in the towns of Lincoln and Weston counting on us to make up the difference. Just as we knew another request would be coming, we know that this won't be the last time we'll need to step up to help our neighbors. The Greater Boston Food Bank is severely stretched, and that strain is passed along to the local food pantries. Thank you for your past donations, and thank you for your donations now. Once we learn what is exactly needed, there will be a sign-up genius on the First Parish website asking for specific donations. Donations can be left in a bin on the porch of the parish house, a new location for us, or in a bin at Donnellan's, or left behind St. Joseph's Church. Martin Luther King once said, "Life's persistent and most urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" This is a chance for us to love our neighbors. And please join me in the opening words. If we do not keep pace with our companions, perhaps it is because we hear the beat of a different drummer. Let us keep pace with the music we each hear, however measured or far away. Henry David Thoreau.
So we're going to try something new this morning. Sarah and I are going to share a hymn, number 313, "Oh, What a Piece of Work Are We," and we hope you will sing along at home. Oh, what a piece of work are we, how marvelously wrought. The quick contrivance of God's hand, the wonder of God's thought, the wonder of God's thought. Why need we look for miracles outside of nature's law? Humanity we wonder at with every breath we draw, with every breath we draw. But give us room to move and grow, but give our spirit play, and we can make a world of light out of the common clay, out of the common clay. Now, please join me in saying the words that gather us together, our covenant. In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all.
Our reading this morning is from Genesis 1, verse 1, from Bishop Tutu's Bible Stories for Children, the Children of God's Storybook Bible. This is the Bible we present to our second graders each year in the spring. In the very beginning, God's love bubbled over. When there was nothing else, no trees, no birds, no animals, no sky, no sea, only darkness. And out of this love, God spoke, "Let there be light." And there was day, and then there was night. And when the first day was done, God smiled and knew that it was good.
We come now to the time in our service that we set aside for prayer, for shared prayer and from the chat box, and for our silent prayers at home. To prepare, we'll listen to a little music, and then have a moment of silence. Your generosity at all times is greatly appreciated, especially now. If you would like to make a donation, there's a link here, fpllincoln.org/donate. And Sarah, I think I'm gonna move right along. I was gonna play a little interlude, but I think I'm gonna keep moving. Because I'm thinking outside the box today. That's the theme of today. And it is the theme of my message this morning, which is kind of funny as we sit here talking about life outside the box, when we're each staring at a box, which has each participant in their own little box. And we're watching from the interior of our home boxes, which may have become our havens during physical distancing. Such are these times. When our sanctuary closed, we were compelled to think outside that box and have been together virtually ever since. Continuing together online and to share services all through the summer, these are very new to First Parish in Lincoln, so outside the box. At this time last year, who would have guessed that this would be church? I love that phrase, who would have guessed? Growing up, when I heard it, it was always in the context of someone being impressed. It's one I remember my grandmother using, and now my mother uses it, and I kind of see the writing on that wall. Who would have guessed? It's a phrase of astonishment, of appreciation, of acknowledgement. Acknowledgement not only for the good or innovative work of someone else, but more subtly, the phrase is an admission of the fact that the speaker didn't guess, that the spark of genius or creativity was not theirs. The great new thing was someone else's to share with the world. This time. Next time it may be you or me, and there always is a next time. But who would have guessed says it wasn't my turn this time. This morning we heard Desmond Tutu's version of creation, which is to my mind the loveliest. Out of the abundance of love, God created. The creation story from Genesis gives us a great example of out of nothing comes something. There are many stories about the origins of things. The Bible offers this one. The stories often conflict with each other and with what modern day scientists theorize about in the beginning. Understanding something new or being presented with new information about something we thought we knew can be challenging. We hold tight to what we find comfortable, soothing, known, and what we've been taught or have thought all along. If you zoomed in early this morning, you would have heard Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. We'll play it again at the end. In his piece, Stravinsky was trying to compose and choreograph the creative spark of spring. It was as if he was trying to set the creation story to music, and in doing so, he came up with something no one had ever heard or seen before. Famously or infamously, when the piece was first performed, many in the audience went off the rails. Reports from the day talk about otherwise calm and upstanding men and women going berserk. Back in the day, the thought was the audience found the music so annoying, so beyond their taste, they rioted. Science has since given us another explanation. The note combinations that Stravinsky composed were so unusual, so beyond what had been heard up until that time, that there was an anatomic response in some people's brains. The music wasn't just not to their taste, it drove them crazy. The musical innovation, the harmonic dissonance, created cognitive dissonance that was irreconcilable for the audience of the day. They went berserk. The new thing was physically unable to be reconciled within the human brain. After its debut, over the next few years, other musicians recognized the genius and began composing works using Stravinsky's work as a foundation. Fast forward a few years, and Rite of Spring is a well-known piece and much loved. Using today's vernacular, we might say, oh, that's so 1913. Now it's pretty tame among the works of today, but it was totally new in its time. Who would have guessed? I think perhaps artists live at the edge of the box. They've got 1 foot in and 2 feet out. Da Vinci, Mozart, Stravinsky, Brubeck, Monet, Picasso, Gaudi, Tharp, and many more, so many more, all pushed the envelope in their artistic fields. Eventually, their innovations became accepted versions of normal, but it took time. Having the spark of creativity, the talent to give the spark a form, and the guts to share it with the world is quite something. If only the world was more ready to embrace something new, to embrace things being different. Stravinsky must have felt bewildered when folks reported that Rite of Spring was so bad people rioted. I wonder what he would think of scientists linking brain function to the experience. The word vindicated comes to mind. Sadly, it was a long time coming. Artists and scientists, they occupied 2 sides of the same box. The creative spark that ends in an opera or sculpture are very close to the sparks which end in a vaccine, or a new element, a new procedure, new technology, or a new understanding. In science, there are so many sparks and so many firsts that it's impossible to even begin naming those who brought them forward to the world. Women and men of all skin tones, well-funded or working in basements, supported by family and friends or ridiculed. Typical learners and those who are not typical learners. Scientists have broken the box apart and have put it back together. In order to understand and enlighten, people of science and art are pulled from the known to the unknown and back again. They gracefully embrace a state of who would have guessed. Right, inside, outside, and at the edges of the box. If art and science are on the edges, weaving in and around the lines of the box are our understandings of spirituality. In the earliest days of human existence, in trying to make sense of the unknown, people turned to myths and stories to understand the world. Absent sophisticated science and technology, and too busy existing to have much time for art, the first religions developed the idea that something divine, something beyond reach, has power over earthly things. People's daily lives were supported or thwarted by unseen mystical beings. Then Abram stepped out of the fold and, who would have guessed, said, I'm pretty sure there's just one God. In fact, I'm so sure I'm willing to sacrifice my son to prove it, which, as the story goes, he was prevented by doing from the work of his one God's own hand. And God had him change his name to Abraham. At the time, people thought Abraham was a radical. They were sure he had gone berserk. Rather than acknowledging his having received the spark of new understanding. The rest of the Bible is replete with stories of the struggle to make this brand new thinking understood and known. Similarly, it was easy to think that young, wealthy, smart Siddhartha Gautama would coast through his life. There was no reason for him to do anything but what was expected. His spark awakened him to a new path, one that went against the spiritual practices in that time and place. It was after his death that he was given the title of the Buddha. During his lifetime, his message was radical. Now it is widely practiced and greatly admired. Talking about religion, let's talk politics and really make it a day. Centuries after the Buddha had his awakening, young, wealthy, smart Mohandas Gandhi would leave a comfortable life to follow his own spark of civil disobedience. Seeing injustice around him, he led political change for his country. His example sowed the seeds that now flourish in modern political protest. The actions of the 60s and 70s saw young, smart people following Gandhi's lead. 2 decades after India's emancipation, young, smart Martin Luther King Jr. combined the faith of Abraham with the art of oratory and the style of Gandhi to attempt to shift this country towards civil rights for all. Who would have guessed there would be so much work still to do today? I continue to be impressed with how protesting has morphed, with today's youth using technology to assist their civil disobedience. So young and so smart. And where would we be without these creators? We each have at least one favorite example of outside the box thinking. Perhaps I've named that person for you this morning. Perhaps I haven't. There are thousands more unnamed for want of time today. I invite you now to take a moment to type the name or names of your favorite innovators into the chat. We'll take a quick pause so you can consider and then type it in. No explanation needed. Let's do this now. And please be generous. Take a moment. Who has inspired you as a person, as a professional, as a human? Who are your innovators? These are great names. Keep them coming. All these creators you have shared dared to see the spark outside of the norm. In this week's Parish News, I'll share this list and I encourage each of us to learn more about some or all of them, especially if there's a name that you don't recognize. These are the people who helped shape the people of First Parish. So that's a peek at life outside the box. Inside the box are the rest of us. And what does that mean? We sometimes venture to the edge. Sometimes we even dip a toe outside. A few of us have had out of the box moments. It could be our most important role to leave ourselves open, to support and to sustain, to be willing accomplices in the creation of a great new thing. Our spark may be to see the work of another and to value it. Perhaps the creation story never ended. Perhaps the purpose to our living is to continue the story. Sometimes you're the creator, sometimes you are the thing being created, and sometimes you're the one acknowledging the creation. With grace, we do this with open minds and open hearts, with a willingness and desire to become newly enlightened, no matter how uncomfortable, how fearful, or how unusual that new thing, that new thought, that new way might feel. And isn't now just such a time? Out of the abundance of love, what is our creation story? It's anybody's guess. This morning for our closing hymn, I called in a favor. My nephew is a Berklee College of Music student, and he is COVID sheltering in Ohio with a bandmate. And I asked him to record our final hymn. So it's a little grainy. The words will be up on the screen for you to listen, and please sing along too. His performance is wonderful, but this works best when you're singing along at home. So please join Noah Solt and me in singing our final hymn. It's number 139. Sorry.
Till the world shall witness, never known in days of old, never dreamed by ancient sages, howsoever free and bold. Sons and daughters shall inherit, wondering thoughts to us unknown. When the dawn of peace its splendor over all the world has thrown. Then shall rule with winged freedom, worlds of health and human good, worlds of commerce, worlds of science, all made one and understood. They shall know a world transfigured, which our eyes but dimly see. They shall make its towns and woodlands beautiful from sea to sea. For our spirits then shall move them, but we vaguely apprehend things magnificent and holy, making joy and labor blend. Then shall bloom in song and fragrance, harmony of thought and deed, fruits of peace and love and justice, where today we sow the seed.
And our call to ministry is a way we walk out into the world.
We go forth from the worship of God to be faithful to the vision of Jesus, to affirm each person's dignity and to cherish the living earth.
This morning, may we go forth ever ready to see the spark of creation in our own hands and in the hands of others. Blessed be.